you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.
Hello and welcome to Found by Shalom World. I'm your host from Ireland, Katie Ascough. On this show, I talk to guests about their journey into the Catholic faith and how that inspires the work they do now. Our guests are truly amazing individuals. They're deeply committed to Christ, and through their various ministries, they're helping others to find and follow Him too. Today we're speaking with Father Mark Mary of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. Father currently lives in New York City, where he prays 4 to 5 hours every day, serves the poor, and is Director of Communications for the Order. We're going to hear all about Father Mark Mary's life, his faith, his vocation, and the many projects he is currently working on. I hope you enjoy our conversation with Father Mark Mary, and welcome to Found. Father Mark Mary, you're so welcome to the show.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me.
So how are things in New York at the moment?
Things in New York are interesting, like they are in the rest of the world. We just got a little snowfall, so that always adds a little bit of fun to city living, but doing very well, thank you.
Absolutely. Great to hear it. So, Father, you do a lot of media. I know you've done over 150 videos for Accenture Presents, and you're on a ton of different platforms and all these different things. But something you don't tend to talk about too often is yourself. So I just want to invite you to do exactly that. And maybe we can start with your faith. So can you tell us, have you always been Catholic? Have you ever left your faith? What's that journey been like?
Yeah, so I did grow up Catholic. And but there was a moment, definitely my freshman year of college, where I grew up in the faith, was involved with youth group, but freshman year of college is where I had this conversation with a girl who was an atheist, and I started defending the faith, and all of a sudden it hit me that I believe, and it needs to affect the rest of my life, because there were certain parts of my life which weren't being touched by the faith. And so once that moment happened, again, it was freshman year of college, and then I gave Jesus permission to kind of go into every corner of my life. And from there is when a vocation to be a missionary, to be a priest, started to come.
And you were one of those people who was kind of good at everything. It sounds like you had a pretty good life. You grew up in California, you were good at school, you were good at sports. I know you had a beautiful girlfriend at one stage. What made you leave all of that to become a Franciscan Friar of the Renewal in the Bronx, New York?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I had a blessed life. And I think it was actually the goodness of the soil in which I found myself growing up, which gave the permission to, once a seed of the gospel or seed of my vocation was planted, it was actually, I think, the good soil which allowed it to bear fruit in my life. And, choosing to follow Jesus and choosing to be a priest and choosing to be a friar, it's not a good thing because there's other bad things. It was the thing I desired most, the goodest thing. And so I think the competing goods or the other goods, actually created the environment for Jesus to call me and to win kind of my life.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear about the first moment that you ever heard about the CFRs. I believe it happened in an In-N-Out, which for anyone who doesn't know is a fast food restaurant, mostly based in California. I've been a couple of times. The burgers are amazing. But why was it at that moment that you heard about the CFRs, and what stirred within you? What attracted you to them?
Yeah, God works in mysterious ways. It was really through Mother Teresa. To someone speaking about Mother Teresa, I received my vocation to serve and love the poor. And then I learned about the sacraments, and I knew I wanted to be a priest and bring Jesus, and bring the Eucharist to people, bring confession to people. So I was looking for a place to do both, to love and serve the poor as a full-time job, but also where I could be a priest. And it was, like you said, it was at In-N-Out Burger after a young adult meeting with another young man. I don't even remember his name. I just met him once, and he said, there's this group of friars out in New York who are hardcore, and they sleep on the ground. And as a 19-year-old, it was kind of the most intense thing I heard about. And so I looked them up that night, and I read our constitutions. I just read a piece of paper that says who the friars are, and it was It was like my heart on a piece of paper. It was everything I was looking for. And so from that moment, really, I just kind of, I knew this is where the home that God had prepared for me.
Wow. And I'm sure it was a journey as well, because this is something, it's a huge commitment and it takes a long time to become a friar. I know you renew these 1-year vows, and I have heard you say that you actually found the renewal of your 1-year vow possibly more frightening than when you had your final vows and you committed to this for life. Why do you think it was initially a little scary for that 1 year? And then how do you think you came to a place of really just having confidence in this being your vocation?
Yeah, it's, I think there's something about making a commitment for a year. And that's all it was. It was a vow for a year. The first time I ever really vowed to do anything for a year. But there's still a risk. It's like, okay, is God going to be who he says he is? Like, is God going to provide the way in which he says he's going to provide? And so taking that first leap of faith, it's much more of a leap of faith. But after living the life for a number of years, I had 3-4 years of real kind of experience of God's provision for my life. And so making final vows, I had the confidence that he was going to keep providing for me. And so it was much more peaceful to make that final vows, that whole lifetime commitment.
So you've been with the CFR since 2009, so about 12 years now, is that right?
That's right, that's correct.
Amazing. And you've been obviously in New York. I think you started in New York, you went to Honduras for a few years, then back to New York. So it's been this long and I'm sure incredible journey. You became a priest in 2018. What has been the highlight of your vocation? And has there been anything that's been most challenging or most difficult?
Yeah, great question. I think some of the difficulty is just in you never stop having occasion for growth, and the Lord takes our development and our formation and our holiness serious, right? And so wherever it is that you're still struggling, you're still weak, the Lord's going to provide opportunities for growth and for healing in those areas. And so, so there's always something, but that's kind of what we sign up for, right? I wanted to join a community where daily and ongoing and lifelong conversion would be something I was pursuing, and so that's happening. The joys, right? I knew being a priest would be awesome, right? It's like literally I reoriented my whole life towards pursuing it, but it's even been better than I expected. It really has been. Just like for example, hearing confessions for like an hour at some event, and you're just there like courtside, front row seat to God changing life after life after life. Like who am I to be chosen to be in this place? And I love everything about being a friar. I love everything about being a priest. So the whole thing has been joy and gift.
And I have to ask you, how did you come up with the name Father Mark Mary? Why did you choose Mark Mary as your name?
Yeah, so my full religious name is Mark Mary Maximilian, and I am baptized Mark, and I was on the feast of the Holy Name of Mary, and I just knew that was the name the Lord had chosen for me. Maximilian Kolbe was its own discernment, but what I'll just say is this: I went home after discerning these names for the first time, and I did a little web search, for Mark of Aviano, Maximilian Kolbe, whatever, and I learned Mark of Aviano's feast day is August 13th, St. Maximilian Kolbe is August 14th, and the Assumption is August 15th. And so just seeing how they all lined up, this was just like this final confirmation that this was the name that the Lord had chosen for me.
Wow, that's amazing. So I have to ask you this as well, because this, to me, I think is absolutely hilarious. You've been confused before in public spaces as a ninja and a Jedi. Is that correct?
Both are
obviously
very
some people
correct,
get a little confused.
100% true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and multiple times.
So confirmed. Multiple times, really. Can you tell us about some of those stories, and then maybe explain the distinction between monk, friar, brother, priest? Because I think there is some genuine confusion there. But maybe, why ninja or Jedi? How do people confuse you for those things?
Yeah, it's first of all, New York's awesome because people say what they're thinking, and so they're not shy.
Yeah.
And so definitely had people think we were coming from like some Star Wars convention or like some Renaissance play or something like that. And definitely like, hey, do you guys like practice kung fu in there? Like 100% real stories, no hyperbole, and we get it a lot. People just don't know.
So funny.
People just don't know, and so they see. Yeah, that's just what comes to mind, probably from the movies. Yeah, actually, usually when I explain what it is, I say, like, "Have you heard of a monk?" They're like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, "Yeah, we're kind of like that." The biggest thing, I guess, between like a monk and a friar would kind of be location and stability. Like monks live in monasteries, typically outside of the city, and they're there for pretty much their whole life. Whereas friars, we're going to be in the mix, kind of be in the city, and we travel and move quite a bit. So that would be the biggest difference.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for explaining that. So not a ninja, not a Jedi, but a friar and a priest, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I also would love to know what like a day in your life looks like. I've had the privilege actually of visiting the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal in Derry in Ireland. We did some filming with them, my husband and I, a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, so we got to see their schedule a little bit. Like they obviously pray a lot and have a lot of communal time, and people were constantly like ringing the doorbell. There's just so much activity and movement. What does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we have friaries in different countries throughout the world, and in these friaries, we're going to have this. What we're going to have consistent is our prayer schedule, and so we pray together basically 5 times a day, and it adds up to 4 or 5 hours. And so that's like the liturgy of the hours, daily mass, holy hour, rosary. We pray all this together at 6, 7:30, midday, in the evening from 5 to 6, and then usually around 9 o'clock. The work itself, which is what we do kind of between these prayer hours, is going to depend on the apostolate of the given friary or the given friar. And so, like you mentioned, in England or in Ireland, perhaps there's a little bit more door ministry, and that's one of the reasons we choose to live in areas where there's need, is just so that people can always come knock on our door. Where I live now in Harlem, we do have like a soup kitchen. Where I used to live in the Bronx, we had a homeless shelter and a youth center. In Honduras, where I lived a couple of years, we run like a medical center that gives free care to the poor. And so the need is going to respond to the needs of the people, or the work is going to respond to the needs of the people, but the prayer is going to be consistent across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess like a big part of your charism is working with the poor, and it sounds like that might be what you do, particularly where you're based. So I would love to know, and I've watched the documentary that you guys did, Outcasts, which really goes into your work with the poor. It's actually quite difficult to watch at times, but it's just so real, so human. And I do encourage, anyone who's watching this who is, maybe over 18. I don't know what age you usually prescribe to it, but I think that's what I saw, over 18, to just go and check it out. But I'd love to hear from, your own mouth, how you find working with the poor. Like, how has that impacted your life? Because I imagine it must really kind of impact you in a pretty deep way.
Yeah, amen. And it's, again, this is something that's going to look different depending on the type of work, because, it's not always glamorous or romantic. Sometimes the effects of our choices in the world we live in, and personal sin, corporate sin, they have a real effect on people. And so a lot in New York, a lot of the poor are kind of struggle, and they're a little bit more closed off or a little bit more protective. And so it's a little bit more work to get in. But like in the shelter, like once you're in, these guys become family. They become your brothers. And, it's beautiful work. It's rewarding work. It's not always successful in the way you'd want it to be. Not everybody who comes in leaves clean or whatever. But it's the work of Jesus. It's the work of Jesus, the work of the church, and it's to bring His love to the world. And He loves us when it's easy to love us. He loves us when it's hard to love us. And but I've just learned so many lessons, and been so encouraged by our neighbors and those who I've been given permission to walk with. It is a gift to see the way in which they live their faith. Yeah,
I can only imagine. And yeah, just love the work that you do, especially in that area. It's incredibly touching and moving. I think a really good example for the rest of the church, because we all have a duty to look after the poor, and you guys obviously just fulfill that in a particular way. So thank you for the work you do. Something else I've heard you say, and I'd love to just go into this a little bit. I've heard you say that the CFRs, you're a relatively small order, relatively recent, about 140 brothers, I believe, in your order, but you make a lot of noise. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, we're compared to other Franciscan communities, we're not very large, but from the very beginning, in the providence of God, we've been, particularly through use of the media, we've been involved with kind of speaking into the culture. And so that begins with, in the late 80s, even before that really, but in the late 80s with Father Benedict and Father Andrew on EWTN, right? And they were on EWTN on a regular basis, kind of when EWTN was at its height. And there was, a CFR, and then Father Stan Fortuna doing his music and traveling across the world. And slowly, like, that's kind of been handed down with the music, the media work. And I think because particularly of our use of kind of the mass media, our reach is disproportionate to our size.
And you're the director of communications for the CFRs, right? So I think you're a great person to ask about this, because your digital evangelization, I believe that's what you call it, at least on your homepage of your website, it comes up digital evangelization. You've got these 3 major initiatives. What is the goal for those things? Like, what do you hope to achieve, and what effects have you seen it have so far?
Yeah, in Evangelii Gaudium, the apostolic exhortation of Pope Francis, he reminds us that the church needs to do a bit of a better job at taking the first step. And so this is I'm just trying to get the gospel into people's ears, trying to get the gospel into people's eyes, in front of them, get them in their homes, and people are watching and people are listening to something, and so just trying to do everything we can to bring the gospel into that space, and Pope Benedict, I think it was in one of the World Communications Days, reminds us that, like, the digital space is a real space and people are really there, and the gospel needs to be there. And so just trying to respond to the evangelical call that we all share as Christians, as disciples, to bring the Lord and bring the gospel into all areas, including the digital continent through our media work.
And from the feedback that you get, I imagine, you get probably tons of messages, emails every single day, because your platforms are pretty substantial online. Do you find you're mostly reaching out to people who already are in the faith, like you're building them up, which is obviously really important work to build up the faithful, but do you also find maybe people are coming into the church or being, intrigued by the faith by seeing your online efforts?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends a little bit on the platform and the work. Certainly there's been fruitfulness kind of across the board. Primarily what we're hearing, though, isn't necessarily coming from no faith to Catholic faith, but people going from sort of a bit of a lukewarm faith to kind of regular, more serious discipleship. And that's really what we're trying to do, is we're really trying to teach people to pray and really encourage people to pray and just invite people deeper. But certainly, particularly in our work with like Ascension Presents, those videos are hitting people all across the board and having some really beautiful fruit in their lives.
Amazing. And I'd love to hear more about the podcast, because I think that's a pretty substantial initiative. You've been launching podcasts weekly since April 2020. That's a pretty big commitment. So how has it been going? What kind of topics do you cover? And why the name Poco a Poco?
Yeah, it's funny, because just the backstory real quick is that there was 3 other friars who we had lined up for it. And I was talking to them, and somebody said, "Hey, I'd like to make a donation. What do you need?" So we were trying to start a podcast. And then we actually got the equipment. I talked to the brothers, and they were like, we weren't really that serious about it.
Now it's real.
And so, and so that's how I ended up doing it with Father Angelus and Father Innocent. And, there's, as I just see our life and how it affects people, there's nothing more fruitful and effective in our evangelization than we actually bring somebody into the friary. If you just see somebody sit at a table with us, spend a weekend with us, it really, really, really impacts them. And so the idea with our podcast is basically this digital friary, to bring people in to experience our fraternity, to experience kind of our heart for the gospel, our heart for one another, and as best we can through the digital space to bring people again into our own lives. And it's been shockingly fruitful. It's like it's really weird to hear, and it's a little bit overwhelming, the impact it's having on people's lives.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty incredible, and the poco a poco, it's just as little by little, and there's a lot to it, but simply I think for the sake of this context is our life is supposed to give a prophetic witness that life is a pilgrimage to the Father, right? And that there is a part of the nature of all people really, that we're on a journey, and we're on a journey home, we're on a journey to the Father, and that this earth is not our home, and that it's made like a real journey. It's made little by little, step by step. And so that's why Poco Poco's kind of made it into our kind of the non-official slogan of the CFRs.
Love it. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And just finally, where can we find all of these great initiatives?
Yeah, I would go to franciscanfriars.com. We have /media, and we kind of have our platform there. A really great hub as well is our Instagram. So it's CFR_Franciscans. And I wrote a book. Can I mention the book?
Absolutely, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just put out a book with the Center Press called Habits for Holiness, which is basically taking how we follow Jesus in the midst of the world, unpacking it, and then proposing it as a super practical guide for the laity. So ascensionpress.com/holiness, and I'm pretty excited about that work.
Wow. Well, we are too. Can't wait for that to come out and to get our hands on it. So thank you so much, Father, for your time today and for all the great work that you're doing. I mean, across the board, there's just so much going on there. So thank you for everything.
Thank you very much, Katie.
God bless. We just spoke with Father Mark Mary here on Shalom Worlds Found. Until next time, take care.
Each one of us is on a journey. Some of us are on the journey of growing up, some of us are in education, some of us are falling in love, going to work, struggling with unemployment or ill health. We all need to have the scriptures open to us. We all need to encounter Jesus on the road. I really warmly welcome the work of Shalom World Television. Thank you for the way in which you assist in the mission of the church, helping them to come to terms with the eternal truth as it applies in their lives, whatever their journey. And I extend my blessing to you and to all your viewers, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.